adventures, and welcome to another exciting episode of Daily December 2021. This is day 22. So I feeling a little bit better than last time. And I just watched The Matrix Resurrection. And without getting into any spoilers, the movie is that is the best way to describe it. It's not a bad movie. It's got some great performances. Neil Patrick Harris is brilliant in it. Surprisingly enough, I think the quote unquote worst performances in it were probably Carrie-Anne Moss and Keanu Reeves. And it's not because they did anything wrong. I think the direction they were given was just bad. They both spent the entire movie talking like this the entire time. They never changed the volume of their voice, no matter what they were doing, and it was always a little bit breathy. And it just, I don't know. Anyway, so I saw the movie. I don't regret watching it. I'd like to do an entire video talking about kind of just the lore implications, because I actually like the lore behind the Matrix, specifically how it was dealt with in the Matrix on the Line, which was an MMO that came out years and years and years ago, and was considered canon at the time. And they went into some really interesting ideas in there. This completely throws out the Matrix Online. It's not canon anymore. But they do come up with some interesting lore stuff. So anyway, that's not what I wanted to talk about. What I wanted to talk about is fight scenes in movies. And the reason I wanted to talk about them is because I've seen quite a few movies recently, and I have been shocked by just how bad some of the fight scenes are. And I have a slight bit of a unique perspective because I've had stage combat training. I actually was a fight director for a local theater production. And by fight director, I mean I choreographed a fight in it. There was only one quote-unquote fight in the entire show. The show is Tom Sawyer. So you know that really action-filled show. But I got to choreograph and design the entire fight. And I think it turned out really nicely. And I've done my own fair share of stage combat. I was in West Side Story. And I got to, I was Bernardo in West Side Story, and I got to do the big fight at the end of Act 1. That I choreographed as well because the director was a dipshit and didn't understand fight directing. And then in college, I had a little bit of training in stage fighting and stage combat. Combine that with I practiced martial arts for 2 decades, and I've studied film combat and I've studied stage combat on my own, and I've really gotten into stunts. Like I study stunt work into the things like that. The Sudarsu brothers. I watch all the amazing stuff that they do with their stunt team, and I really enjoy good stage combat and good film combat. And I don't know what it is, but the quality of combat in a few movies that have come out and a few projects that have come out have just been awful. And for me, it completely takes me out of the movie when I see really bad uh, film combat and really bad action in general. It's just like, why would you do that? And the two things that made me think about this the most are the new Netflix Cowboy Bebop series, which has already been canceled. And I totally understand why it was canceled. It was poorly done. It's another thing where I don't regret watching it. But it's obvious that there were active choices that were made in the production that were the wrong choices, and it was repeated over and over and over again. And so when you make that many bad decisions, it wasn't mistakes. These were active choices that were wrong. And you make that many bad decisions, there are consequences. And in The Matrix Resurrection, I saw the same thing. Though the mistakes that they made were different. The choices that they made were different. They were still bad choices. So in Cowboy Bebop, when I watched the first action scene, I was a little bit underwhelmed by it because it didn't look good. And this, I'm relatively certain this was a stylistic choice that they made, and it was the wrong choice to be made. It was just a bad choice. Because actually, when I see bad action in movies, I immediately will look up who the stunt coordinator is, who the action coordinator. There's literally like a dozen different titles to find out who it was that actually choreographed this. You could be the fight choreographer. You might be the stunt choreographer. You might be just head of stunts. You might be the stunt director. You might be the fight director. You might be the sword master. There's so many different titles, and so it's remarkably difficult to figure out who it is that's actually choreographing this stuff. But I did find it for Cowboy Bebop, and the guy that was choreographing it, I've seen his other work, and it's good. So it wasn't that this person just didn't know what they were doing. No, they're relatively talented. I'm actually going to see if I can look it up real quick. So Bebop fight choreographer. I'm going to see if I can find the dude's find out who it was. And again, IMDb is great for stuff like this, but oh dear Lord, is it annoying? So let's check. Let's try stunt. Stunt coordinator. Stunt coordinator. Alan Poppleton. Alan Poppleton is who is the stunt coordinator for this. That's their title. And if you're wondering this other stuff that they have done, they were stunt coordinator on The Wolverine, which was actually a pretty decent movie, and the action in it is really, really good. I'm trying to think. I'm looking over their stuff. They apparently were the stunt coordinator in Cirque du Soleil. They were the fight choreographer of The Expendables 2, fight choreographer for The Hunger Games, The Chronicles of Narnia, Voyage of the Dawn Treader. It looks like all of the Chronicles of Narnia series, they were the fight coordinator. All of these shows had really good fight choreography. So it's not that this person didn't know what they were doing, but they made a stylistic choice, I think, to attempt to emulate anime fight scenes. Specifically when anime attempts to emulate manga fight scenes, which is every single action scene where there was actual like fighting, not just gunplay, but fighting, and it even happened in some of the gunplay as well. The actors would pause after every move, so it would be like punch, da, do do, do do, do do, do do, boo, do do, boo, do do, boo, and you'd see this throughout the entire thing as you would watch as each little scene is the best way to describe it. As each movement, as each little scene was done, it would always end on a pause. And it was generally, you'd only have, 2 or 3 like movements within each little scene. And always like, boom. If you didn't catch it when you watch it, go back and just watch the first fight scene in the Cowboy Bebop remake. The whole scene only lasts, I think, maybe 10 minutes. So go back and watch it, and watch how when he comes in, like he flips the gun, boom, and he hits someone, boom, and they stop every single time. And it's not that the camera stops, the actors pause. And it's obvious that they're pausing and it's not a freeze frame or something, because they don't completely stiffen, they just stop moving. But you can still see, like, their clothes still move. Their hair still moves. So you can see that they're actually stopping every time. Like I said, every 3 or 4 moves, they would stop. Now, in an anime fight scene, that actually does happen. You'll see these, big blows where it'll be like, pow! And it's a stylistic thing in some animes. It's not every just a single one, but it is... if you watch the actual Cowboy Bebop anime, that is part of the fight scenes. Though it didn't happen anywhere near as often as it did in the live action version, you would see that. But because it's animation, when everything would stop, everything would stop. And it would be like a freeze frame, effectively. And that wasn't what happened here. Here, they actually had the actors just stop moving so that they could get the shot that they wanted of a reaction or something like that. And it just looked really bad. It completely took me out of the show. And this happened in every single action scene in the entire series. Is they would have these little hiccups every 3 or 4 moves. We have to stop and pose, stop and pose, stop and pose, stop and pose. And it just, again, I understand, because I've seen the rest of this coordinator's work. This is not what they do. I don't know who made the decision, but this was an active choice to do that. And I understand why the choice was made, and it was absolutely 100% the wrong choice. If they wanted to emulate that style of fighting, that's actually been done in a live action version of an anime. If you've ever seen the movie Street Racer, I love the movie Street Racer. I think it got a really bad rep, and it didn't need to, because it really felt like a live action anime. It was actually directed by the Wachowskis. They are the Wachowski sisters are they're the people that created the original Matrix and all that. I believe Lana is the one that directed Matrix Resurrections. So I can't remember her sister's name for the life of me right now, but I know Lana was the one that did this. So instead of having both of them, it was just one of them. But anyway, Speed Racer is brilliant, and they do that in Speed Racer, where they'll do these punches like bow, baff, things like that, and they would actually freeze frame, or they'd actually do kind of almost a bullet time, where you would see the actors freeze, very similar to what you would see in the original Matrix bullet time stuff, because the actors would freeze, but the camera would still move slightly, and it was a really cool effect, but it felt like an anime action scene. Go back and watch. There's not a ton of like quote unquote fights But there's a decent amount of action in the movie. Some of it is comedic action where Sprocket and Sprocket and Spraddle, I think their names are riding around on a thing and running into stuff. That's all categorized under action. And they would have had stunt actors, doing pratfalls and all those other things. So throughout the entire movie, anytime there was action, you would see this little, these little pauses and things like that, and it was really, really well done. It's one of the reasons I love the movie. That is the right way to do exactly what they were attempting to do in Cowboy Bebop, and they just did it wrong. They made a choice, and it was absolutely 100% the wrong choice. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't like, well, we tried something and we failed. No, they made a bad choice and decided to stick with it. Because as soon as they started, literally, they should have been able to figure this out in Video Village. If you're not familiar with what Video Village is, and to be 100% honest, I'm not sure Video Village is still a thing that happens on sets. The Video Village, what it used to be is when you were shooting something, you would have this little place called Video Village where you'd have all the different angles and stuff. You could actually watch what you just shot, and in some of them, you could actually do some little edits right there to see. And it's generally there so that the director can look and see, did we get the shot that we need and everything like that. And if they didn't catch it in Video of a Village, they should have caught it in the dailies the next day. If you're unaware, dailies are basically where the production staff sits down and watches the stuff that they shot the day before to make sure that they got everything that they were supposed to. There's no reason this should have made it to the actual finished product. Like there are so many checks and balances built into the filmmaking process that there's no way it accidentally made it into the film. No, this was an active choice. They're like, no, this is what we're gonna do, and it was 100% the wrong choice. Moving over to The Matrix Resurrection, if you're unaware, the first Matrix movie is brilliant, brilliant movie. The first time I saw it, I had a friend lend me a DVD of it, and he lent it to me. He said, "Oh, have you ever seen The Matrix?" I'm like, "No, I've never. I have no idea what that is." Like, "Oh my god, dude, you have to watch this." And the first time I watched it up in my room on a tiny little TV that I had up there. And I watched it, and it blew my mind. The action scenes were monumental. They created an entirely new style of action for it, and it was choreographed by Yun Wo-ping. Yun Wo-ping is probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, action choreographer currently living. The stuff that Yun Wo-ping choreographed are things like The Matrix, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. He's worked with some of the greatest martial artists in history. Like he's done a bunch of work with Sammo Hung and Jet Li, and he's absolutely brilliant. He's one of the best people in the world, and he's actually still choreographing. He's in his 70s now. He's still working, or at least I believe the most recent movie he did was in 2019. So it's possible he's retired since 2019, but because we all know what happened to 2020, it's also extremely possible that he just didn't work in 2020 because it was 2020. He did the Ip Man films, which are just absolutely brilliant. So the original Matrix trilogy were all choreographed by Yuen Ping, and uh, the second and third Matrix movies were not great. The second one was okay. The third one is just a bad movie. But the action scenes in it were still amazing. And there's a lot of really fun things you can see in the movie. The bad part of the movie is the story itself is just bad, and there's some bad acting in there as well from really good actors. Lawrence Fishburne delivers some just horrible lines, and he is a brilliant actor. Carrie Ann Moss and Keanu Reeves do some real bad ones in there too. Jada Pinkett Smith has some real stinkers in there as well. So all of those are really brilliant, amazing actors and actresses. So it's obvious that it wasn't that they didn't know what they were doing. Shift over to the Matrix Resurrection. The fight choreographer has never really done anything like the Matrix, or even like a full-on feature film. They've done some smaller independent stuff, but they've never done something like a big, massive blockbuster like the Matrix Resurrection. I'm actually going to look up the dude, and this was another one where it annoyed the hell out of me because I couldn't figure out. Because I don't think I think. Come on. No, that's how I figured it out. Because they are still called a choreographer. Alright. Choreographer. Fight choreographer. Joshua Groth. Joshua Groth is a stuntman and has done a lot of stunt work. But as far as actually doing stunt coordination and fight coordination, most of the stuff they do I've never heard of. The big games that they've been a part of, like they were a part of the Hunger Games series as a stunt performer. They, I believe, they were actually Keanu Reeves' stunt double in the original Matrix movies. So it's not that they don't understand stunts, but oh my, did they get this wrong. First of all, The Matrix was a live-action anime. Is 100% what it was. And if you actually watch some of like the old the documentaries and stuff, like the making of the Matrix and stuff, the Wachowskis were really into anime and manga, and you just saw it in the way that they storyboarded, in the way that they shot things. Like the opening scene in the original Matrix movie, where Trinity, played by Carrie Ann Moss, is ambushed by a bunch of cops, and then she does all this really cool, awesome stuff, and you get to see your first taste of bullet time. Is set up like an anime. They actually used angles and things like that, shooting angles into the things like that you see in anime and manga. And if you look at the storyboards, it is literally a manga. You know, the part where she's up like this, and then she looks up and you can see the guy underneath, or the scene where you see Neo is looking at Morpheus, and you can see Neo reflected in his glass and things like those are taken directly out of anime and manga, and it was brilliant. And then again, they had Yuen Ping choreographing anything, and he understands wire work really, really well. Again, wire work is a part of Chinese cinema, and they are the experts on it. They do so much with it, and the Matrix in itself, the series itself, uses a ton of wire work, and they use what's affectionately called wire fu, which is, you know, all the wire work that you see in like kung fu movies and stuff like that, where they're, you know, jumping, you know, through the air and running on walls and all that stuff. That's all wire work, and it's really brilliantly done in the other stuff. Uh, Joshua Groth has no idea how to do wire work. He really, really doesn't. Without giving too much away, they do recreate the original scene from the first movie in the opening of Resurrection with, you know, where Trinity is caught and everything. And it's almost a shot-for-shot remake, but it 100% is not. And right from that point, you can see that the person that was choreographing everything just did not know what they were doing. The wire work is sloppy. The bullet time, which is, again, something that the Wachowskis created. They invented bullet time. And the way that they did it back then was revolutionary. What they did is they had something like 50 or 60 cameras that were all set up around the actor. And so what they would do is they would put, and they were all green screens. And so what they would do is whenever they needed to do bullet time, they would shoot the actor doing it. And because they had 50 or 60 different angles, they literally could rotate you around the actor. And that's what made it so amazing. That's why you could get these amazing bullet time to the things that no one had ever seen before. Well, bullet time is a thing now. You can find in video games all the time. Like it's not that advanced. And getting 60 some odd high definition cameras and setting them up and doing all the green screening and all that stuff is super expensive. What is significantly easier is to use one camera and then use computer generations and all of our huge advances in CG work to make a similar effect. And when you know what you're doing, it turns out fine. Again, Joshua Groth had no idea how to do wire fu, had no idea how to do bullet time stuff. Like it's really bad. It's blatantly obvious that they're going through motions and not in any sort of danger or anything like that. There was a fight scene between Neo and Morpheus in the new movie, and it's meant to emulate. It's not a shot-for-shot remake, but it's meant to emulate the original fight between Neo and Morpheus in the training dojo. And something that I really loved about the original Matrix is all of the principal actors learned kung fu. Like I think they spent between 4 and 6 months doing nothing but learning kung fu. So they were really, really good. And anytime you saw a close-up, they were actually doing the moves. And if you watch the original Matrix, it's brilliant. These guys are doing these incredibly fast movements. And my understanding is it wasn't, other than the bullet time kind of stuff where they obviously sped it up, everything else was the real actors doing that, at least for the shots where you could see their face. They obviously had stunt doubles. But the action wasn't artificially sped up or anything like that. Like, it was just these guys really, really worked hard to create this. And then you look at the again, this is an homage to the fight scene, and it's just really, really bad. First things first, Morpheus is not using a fighting style I've ever seen in existence. The first thing that he does, he's wearing this long, it almost looks like a kimono that he's wearing open, which is weird. But it was this really long open. It was basically an open shirt gown almost that reached all the way to the floor and had these really big open sleeves, and had like a floral-ish pattern on it. And the first thing he does is he goes and he walks towards him. He goes and he plants one of his hands on the ground and tries to kind of flip up and kick him, which is a kick that exists in martial arts. You actually see it in capoeira a ton. And it's actually, if you do it correctly, it's a really bad kick to get hit with. Because by placing your hands on the ground, you get this torque ability. And the kick comes blindingly fast and super, super hard. Like if you get hit by that kick, especially if you get hit in the head with that kick, you're on the floor. It is a really powerful kick. That's not the kick he did. The kick that he actually did was he slapped the ground, and then the wire work came in, and he kind of just floated in the air and flailed at him a little bit. But because of the cloth that he was wearing, you can't even see the kick hits. You just see all this cloth in the air obstructing everything. And then they put in they use the exact same sound effects that they used in The Matrix 20 years ago, which is great. They were good 20 years ago. They were fun to watch. They're not real sounds, but they fit. And here you just hear the but the movements are all significantly slower. They're significantly less precise. Like you'd watch these punches that are just and it didn't look like any of them were throwing anything. They weren't so secret to combat in general, fake kicking combat, is you need to sell the effort of it. When you throw a punch, you're not actually throwing a really hard punch, especially in film action. Film action, you actually hit actors with some of the blows. And you actually see it on camera. You'll see those are never real hits, by the way, because real hits leave bruises and things like punching someone in the face. There's a lot of really, really, really hard bones in your face. So if you punch someone in the face and you've never done it before and you've never trained like breaking into the things like that, like board breaking or brick breaking or anything like that, the first time you punch someone in the face, you will more likely than not break your hand. Because to hit them with enough force in the face, your bones are not made, the bones in your hand are not made to take that kind of force. That's why breaking is an essential part of a lot of martial arts. Because what happens when you do breaking, what happens is you actually do fracture your bones. You create these little microfractures. Your bones have all these pores in them. And so they're very porous. And that's why they're much lighter than they really should be. For what they're made out of. It's because there's all these holes in there and allows your blood to go through and all that other stuff. What happens when you do breaking and things like that, you create these little micro fractures in your hand and your arms and everything else. And what happens is when the bones heal those micro fractures, they always grow back thicker and stronger. And so if you actually train, this is one of the reasons why a lot of martial arts is conditioning. You actually make your fists, fists denser. And so you actually can punch someone in the face without breaking your hand. It's generally not a good idea to punch someone in the face. As much as it might feel good and it looks cool in movies, it's not a great idea. There's much better places to punch people where you don't risk breaking your hand. If you're hitting someone in the face, the best thing you can do is actually do a palm strike to the face, because your hand will absorb, like the flesh here will absorb most of the impact of your hand, and then your carpals, which is all these little bones in your wrist, and they're surrounded by cartilage, that'll absorb all the impact and you won't break anything. but you will break. Like it's real easy to break someone's nose with a palm strike. Anyway, so going back in film action, you really have to sell the effort that you're putting into it. You have to make it look like you're actually throwing a punch, and a lot of times that's done by tensing your muscles a lot, because you can't actually throw the punch. You will hurt someone, and then you'll get fired and probably sued. But if you tense your muscles and you put the right effort into it, and you make it look real, it on film it reads as real. And they do have other things, like they'll have pads and stuff that you can punch people with and not actually hurt them, so you can do a little bit of that. But none of that was happening here. Something that a lot of people aren't aware of is on film, fast looks weak. It really does. And so the really fast combat of kung fu films and stuff like that, like you really have to know what you're doing, because if you're just going, it looks like you're just flailing, and it looks really fake. It's one of the reasons why like one of the things I was taught when my first stage combat class, which he was talking about old John Wayne films, and he's like, it always blew me away how John Wayne's punches were so slow he could talk to them as he was throwing them. He's like, well, I'm just gonna, and they were these super slow, and you're like, how in the world did you not just walk out of the way of it? Well, it's because slower movement on film looks more powerful. But again, to sell that, you have to sell it. None of these actors were doing this. They were obviously going through motions that they were given, and they were doing it really slowly. Like most of the action in it, I personally believe was probably sped up at least a little bit after it was shot. Now, Keanu Reeves is in his 50s. Carrie-Anne Moss, I believe, is also in her 50s. They're not the same actors they were 20 years ago. 20 years ago, they could spend 6 months learning kung fu and martial arts, and it wouldn't destroy their body. 20 years later, especially if you haven't kept those skills up, you can do some serious damage to your self if you try to get back to being able to do the things that you could do 20 years ago when you were in your 30s, when you were, but both of them were in their very early the 30s. They were pretty damn close to peak physical condition. Technically, peak physical is in your mid to late 20s. They were just barely past that. So 20 years later, I don't know if they still can do that. There are some people that well into their 60s or 70s are still able to do some amazing action. I don't know if Carrie-Anne Moss and Keanu Reeves are those kind of people. So those two actors specifically, I kind of give a pass to, because it's possible they physically couldn't do the kind of action that would be required to make it look good. However, that's where your fight coordinator comes in. When you have someone that is significantly less talented, there are a lot of ways, especially in film, that you can hide that you can make someone that can't do as much combat and as much work, just due to being physically unable to do it, and make them look really good. But it takes a very talented fight choreographer, and 100% Joshua Groth did not step up to the bar. Everything was slow and monotonous. Nothing was sold very well. Every time there was a combat scene, I'd be sitting there going, okay, that was cool. That wasn't. That was really bad. And there were some good things. The actress that played, I think her name was Bugs. That was her name, Bugs. She was really good, and her action was great. Um, which again kind of makes me think that it's possible that some of the actors just weren't quite up to uh, being able to put in the work that would have been necessary to get them up to that level. Because you could see some actors are really really good. Some actors definitely were not. Like I said, the dude that played Morpheus in this was not a fighter. Wasn't the music? He wasn't a bad actor. He was just not a fighter, and it was just painfully obvious. And you just saw this over and over again. And again, Keanu Reeves and Carrie Ann Moss, um, brilliant actors, and I've seen them fight. Keanu Reeves does the John Wick series, and he does a lot of his own action in that. He's really, really talented. But boy, was he not in this. The action just looked bad. There's a scene towards the end where there's a lot of action going on. There's explosions. There's vehicles and the things like this. Another little bit of Hollywood magic. When they shoot things like car chases and stuff like that, they drive really, really slow. Like maybe 10 miles an hour tops when they're doing this stuff. And then what they do is they speed things up a little bit in post production, and they use like forced perspective and other things like that to make it look like they're actually moving much faster than they are. And again, when you have a good stunt coordinator and a good action coordinator, you can't tell that they're going really, really slow because they put enough other things in the scene to make it look like they're going very, very fast. It did not happen in this. You could tell that they were going like 3 miles an hour through every single one of the collisions and explosions. Like it was just boring to watch. And that really gets me out of it. Again, I like good fight scenes. It's one of the reasons I like the Ip Man series with Donnie Yen, because it's just the combat in it is so amazing. And Donnie Yen is a brilliant martial artist, and he's a phenomenal actor. I would love to see him in a million things. He is just that good. And again, Yuen Woo-ping knows his combat, and he choreographs these brilliant, amazing fight scenes. And that's the thing that annoys me about this is the Wachowskis worked with Yuen Woo-ping for 3 movies. They know they've worked with the best. They know what good action is. They had to make a decision here. I don't know if Yuen Woo-ping just didn't want to do it. He was unavailable. But the person that they picked to do this was not up to the job. 100% was not up to the job. And again, there are so many checks and balances that it should have been obvious during shooting that the scenes were not going to be up to the standards that they needed them to be. Much less when they got all the way to releasing the film, a year and a half, 2 years later, however long post took for this. So they actively made a decision of, well, we're just going to let this go. And hopefully the rest of the movie will carry it. Well, it didn't. The story was not horrible, but it wasn't great. Again, there was a lot of great acting performances. Like I said, Neil Patrick Harris played a brilliant character. I really, really enjoyed almost everything he did. There's some stuff towards the end that I was like, It was starting to become towards the end. There was one scene in particular that felt like a parody more than it felt like a part of the movie. But everything else was just like he was really, really brilliant. Like I said, Bugs was really, really good. When he wasn't fighting, the guy that played Morpheus was really, really good. And like I said, Keanu and Carrie Ann just weren't. It wasn't that they were bad. they both gave very similar performances, and they were literally the oldest actors on set. I will almost guarantee that, probably by at least a decade or two. And it was blatantly obvious throughout the entire film that they were just they were a different generation, which can work really, really well. It just didn't here. So anyway, I just wanted to talk about a trend that I've been seeing recently in quite a few films and TV series and things like that, where they just don't take the action seriously. They're like, well, as long as it's there and there's no glaring mistakes, you don't have to worry about it. It's not that big a deal. It was the same thing with the new Star Wars trilogy. The action just wasn't good. It was poorly choreographed. One of the our textbook indications of bad choreography is when a block happens before an attack is thrown. And so the block just sits there waiting for them to throw the attack that they're going to block. And it happened quite a few different times in this movie. It happened quite a few different times in the sequel trilogy for Star Wars, where you would just see someone holding a lightsaber or something, just sitting there holding it, when the attack that's going to hit them either hasn't been thrown yet or is in the process of starting to be thrown. And so they're just standing there waiting for the attack to connect so they could move on to their next move. It's a rookie mistake. Everybody, when they start off doing action and combat, makes that mistake. It just happens. But it 100% is a rookie mistake, and especially when you are doing a film where you can reshoot things. Like if it happens on stage, it happens on stage. It's live. There's nothing you can do. If you accidentally forget a move, or you do a move just a little bit too fast, and you get to the point where, oh shoot, I'm ahead of my scene partner, my fight partner in this. Sometimes there really isn't. By the time you catch that you're ahead of your fight partner, there's really not a whole lot you can do at that point. Is just stand there and try and come up with some reason why it is. Generally, the accepted thing you do is you don't just hold the block there. You'll generally add additional movement or take a breath, something so that you're not holding the block yet. Just like, because you want the block to happen right at the impact, because that looks real. And it didn't happen in this. It didn't. And I've just been seeing this trend over and over again, where they kind of relegate the action to, well, it's not really important. I mean, the really important stuff is when the actors are speaking and acting. But combat and action, that's fluffer stuff. We don't need to do that. And that's not true. Anyone that's actually studied stage combat, good stage combat contributes to the story. Your combat should tell a story in the same way that dance choreography should tell a story. It's not people just flailing around randomly. Everything they do should have every movement they make should have a motivation that comes from the character's own place, that comes from their own background. And everything should feel like the character's making that decision in that moment. It's not a set number of movements that you do. This is a story that your character is telling through body movements, through conflict. That's what action scenes are for. And that's why really good action can change a movie. But recently, I've just been seeing it over and over again, where you just see this action that's half-assed, and it just feels like they're like, well, it doesn't really matter. It's just action. You know, the real important parts of the movie are when the actors are acting. They're not acting here. They're doing action. That's not acting. It's not true. Good fighters, being good in a fight scene is a skill, and it takes a lot of work and effort to be good at doing combat. and just doing any kind of action, whether it's combat, whether it's driving, whether it's gunplay. That is a skill, and it takes a lot of work and effort. And I've just been seeing more and more often recently of productions just phoning in the action and then counting on CGI or other things like that to make up for the fact that the actors aren't really doing a good job. And sometimes that's on the actors. It's they're not putting the effort in. But I'm seeing more and more often really talented fighters and really talented actors doing really half-assed action. And the only way that can be happening, because we've seen them in other movies, we know they know how to make good action, is that the director and the fight choreographer have to be half-assing it. And in The Matrix Resurrection, I think it's blatantly obvious, because the guy that they got just didn't know what he was doing. Didn't have any experience doing wire fu or anything even similar to that. And was just the wrong person for the job. And for a movie as big as The Matrix Resurrection is, there's no reason that they should have had any problem getting a good quality fight director in. Like there's literally no reason it shouldn't have happened. It's not that they didn't have the budget. It sure as hell wasn't that they didn't have the connections. Again, the Wachowskis reinvented action cinema in the late 90s, early to 2000s. They created a brand new style of actions as a cinema, and they're very, very well known for it. Their more recent stuff has not been getting great reviews, so maybe they burned a few bridges, but with the amount of clout in this, and especially with Keanu Reeves has connections, and everyone loves him. And there's a reason why everyone loves him. Everything I've read about him, every interview I've ever seen him in, every time anyone has spoken about meeting Keanu Reeves, he is genuinely one of the nicest people in the world. And that translates into how he works with people. He is a very professional actor. He does his job extremely well, and he's very pleasant to work with. So the idea that there is no way that they could have gotten a competent fight director in is bullshit. And again, this Joshua Growth guy had connections. It feels almost like a form of nepotism. Because again, he's worked with Keanu Reeves before. And he's worked with Keanu Reeves a ton. Like I said, I believe I may be 100% wrong on this. Maybe he didn't, because it doesn't look like he was even working during. No, this guy's brand spanking new. Crap. His first credit is in 2009, which is a decade after the Matrix. So I don't know where they got this guy. I thought he was a stunt double. I thought I had read, at least, that he was a stunt double for Keanu Reeves in the original Matrix. 100% that's false. So I don't know where they got this guy, but he is a stuntman that thought that he could do fight direction, and he was bad. He was remarkably bad at it. And sure, you hire the wrong guy. It's really expensive to change and the things like that. But I don't understand how this guy got the job. He just, wow. It's impressive how bad the fighting was, and it wasn't all of it. Like I said, there was some pretty good stuff. The gunplay was okay, but anytime they started doing wire work and stuff like that, it looked really bad. It was someone that had no idea what they were doing. So, anyway, that's my little rant. Combat is really, really important. I know a lot of, especially in Hollywood, they really look down on stunts and action work in general. The Academy Awards I believe still don't have a stunt category, despite the fact that 100% there should be an Academy Award for Best Stunt Performance. There should be an Academy Award for Best Stunt Choreography, because these people are 100% artists. And the stuff that they do is essential for good storytelling. You know, if you're going to put action scenes in, a good fight choreographer can bring your production from okay to exceptional. And fight scenes are meant to tell a story. They're not just, oh, big explosions. They tell a story. They have a structure and a dialogue built into them. And when you just relegate them to, ooh, flashy moves and they fly in the air, it really destroys any production. So, anyway, that's all for me today. Tune in tonight for my Dune one-shot. I will announce what I'm doing next week tomorrow. So, bye.